Welcome everyone to our Wednesday, March 9th, 2022 show of Going Viral. It's almost exactly 2 weeks into the Ukraine war. Of course, still is the biggest story, but let's start with other international news that's happening, because there are other important things happening in the world. Let's talk about, play a clip on the South Korean elections, which are happening today, which may, have a big effect on Asian politics in general. So here's a clip.
With a record third of people having already cast their ballots in early voting, this is shaping up to be one of the most hotly contested elections ever. Going to the polls, the two frontrunners, Lee Jae-myung from the ruling Liberal Democratic Party and his conservative rival, Yoon Suk-yeol from the People Power Party. After weeks of campaigning, often marred by personal scandals and mudslinging, this contest could be decided by the younger generation. Normally inclined to vote progressive, many young people have been put off by the failure of the ruling Liberals to tackle wealth inequality and the high cost of home ownership.
Rather than saying those in their 20s have become conservative, I think that they have moved away from progressive tendencies.
Job seeker Kim Sung-han is being kitted out for an upcoming interview in a suit rental scheme that's paid for by Seoul Metropolitan Government. It's one of a number of measures to help young people cope in the city.
I think it would be difficult to live in Seoul without this kind of support. Finding a job and making a living is very difficult.
Liberal candidate Lee is hoping to win over the disillusioned young with his own rags to riches story, rising from an impoverished rural background to become governor of South Korea's most populous province. One issue that doesn't feature prominently with young voters is the state of relations with North Korea, which, in spite of several years of diplomatic engagement by the outgoing Liberal President Moon Jae-in, are once again back in a deep freeze. But North Korea is more important with older voters, who it seems have been waiting for this chance to punish the Liberals at the ballot box.
North Korea has been quite provocative. South Korea's reaction has been incompetent.
If you can't gain anything from reconciliatory gestures, then I don't think it's working.
They say the best way to keep the peace is to be ready for war, and I think that's true.
Conservative candidate Yoon has promised a much tougher line with the North if he wins, ensuring this election could have implications way beyond the Korean Peninsula. Rob McBride, Al Jazeera, Seoul.
Right. So that'll be interesting to see what the results of that election are. Again, it's a very important one. As you know, I'm not the only one. Frank, who's been on the show, has been pointing out that this was an important election coming up, and that we should be, keeping it in mind. As Mike can tell you too, because we talked about this at the diner. So again, it's interesting, that. Well, income inequality is such an issue. Again, it should be certainly, and I think in every country, considering how it's gotten worse. So as I was saying about South Korea, it's that program they were talking about again to help incoming workers, younger workers.
Let me intercede a question. What positions are being covered by the election?
The presidency, and I think the parliament as well are
seats in the parliament and the presidency. How many seats are up?
I think it might be all of them. I'm not. I haven't looked into the details of.
So they have a parliamentary
system with the president, though.
The president is separate.
No. I think the president is the head of. Well, the president is elected separately. So I guess it's a presidential system, but with again. It's still it's not a Republican system. It's a parliamentary system.
Okay.
Because let me.
That's important to know that. Yeah. So in other words, you think they're electing.
I think they might be. Let me check right now, but I think they're electing the whole here parliament. Let me check. Okay, it's a single round plurality voting system, 5-year term. The president cannot be reelected, so he only gets one term. Let me see. So I guess maybe it's just the president that they're electing now. But obviously, again, he has a lot of.
But the question is,
authority.
Could they elect a Republican president and a majority of Democratic parliament members? You know, if those were the two parties.
Usually I don't think that's ever happened. Because, you know, again, South Korean society is, you know, you don't like vote. It's less, politics are less personality driven, I'll put it that way. Okay. So generally the leading party will, you know, get a majority in the parliament as well. Again, whenever the voting for that comes around.
So it's been a long time. It's been a long time since they elected a movie star or comedian.
Oh, they don't. Yeah,
they don't do that.
It's similar, you know, like Japan is, well, except in some cases, you know, not generally, you know, personality driven. It's more the party.
Alex,
party. Yeah.
If it's a parliamentary system, a strict parliamentary system, then the that gets the most votes determines who the prime minister is going to be. If it's a hybrid system, which is
I think it's a hybrid, yeah.
The hybrid system, yeah. Okay, then that clears it up. Don't worry.
Okay, great. Thanks. Go on, Alex.
All
Continue.
Right. Well, let's just Steve or Dennis see if they have.
Does anybody want to comment on the South Korean elections?
Or if they know anything? I don't know what anybody.
What's your next thing, Alex?
Okay, give me a sec to pull it up. It's a clip on which we heard part of in the background. It's I've been looking into some of the Indian channels, and this is, you know, they're somewhat, this is a WION, they're somewhat right wing and generally pro, you know, Modi, from what I can tell. But you know, India is in a rather interesting position on the Ukraine war, so you know they're somewhat neutral. I mean, you know, they have obviously less of a dog in the fight. So they have some of their reporting has been quite interesting. Again, like this about what Saudi Arabia and MBS are doing, which is not to basically help Joe Biden out, but will and to take a lot of steps kind of against American interests. So this is rather interesting that's going on. Yeah. So let's play this.
The U.S. also needs to pay more attention to its ties with Saudi Arabia. The relationship is on the rocks. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is sending a clear message. He's unhappy with the Biden administration. He has given an interview. He was asked about U.S. President Joe Biden, whether he misunderstands MBS. Here's what Mohammed bin Salman told the reporter. And allow me to quote what he said. Simply, I do not care. We do not have the right to lecture you in America. The same goes the other way. What is this about? Jamal Khashoggi. Khashoggi was murdered inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. Under Joe Biden, the United States released an intelligence assessment. It directly blames the Saudi crown prince for Khashoggi's death. The kingdom has countered America's claim. It says Khashoggi was supposed to be extradited, the operation went wrong, and MBS had no knowledge of it. But the United States has not wavered from its stand. In fact, Joe Biden has never spoken to MBS. In February, when asked about the high gas prices, Biden said, and I'm quoting, "There's a lot of Middle Eastern folks who want to talk to me. I'm not sure I'm going to talk to them." Well, that off-the-cuff remark could now hurt Joe Biden. The crisis in Ukraine could disrupt global energy supplies. Global oil prices are on fire. Washington could have used Riyadh's help right now, and Team Biden did reach out to Saudi Arabia. Top officials were dispatched to Riyadh last month. America wanted Saudi Arabia to pump more oil. The kingdom has refused to help. Riyadh will release no additional supplies. The result is this. Yesterday, global prices for 1 barrel of oil almost touched $120, the highest in more than a decade. Riyadh's shift away from the U.S. is already yielding results. It stands to make big gains from high oil prices. I have some numbers. Saudi Arabia controls 55% of the world's crude oil supply at present rates. Riyadh is projected to earn $375 billion from oil this year. This is the kingdom's second highest collection ever. Let me put that number into perspective. Saudi Arabia earned $145 billion from pumping oil in 2021. In 2022, it will earn $375 billion. It's a jump of more than 150%. As a candidate, Joe Biden vowed to make Mohammed bin Salman a pariah, but the Saudi crown prince turned this crisis into an opportunity. He is mounting a comeback on the world stage. With money in the bank, Saudi Arabia wants to chart its own course on foreign policy. MBS wants to be a player in the Ukraine crisis. This week, he spoke with both Putin and Zelensky, and he's offered to mediate between Russia and Ukraine. At the UN General Assembly, Riyadh voted against Russia and condemned the Russian invasion. MBS also wants to directly deal with Saudi Arabia's arch-rival Iran. And this is what he said about Iran. Allow me to quote again. Iran and Saudi Arabia are neighbors. Neighbors forever. We cannot get rid of them, and they cannot get rid of us. So it's better for both of us to work it out and look for ways in which we can coexist. Mohammed bin Salman is grabbing the bull by its horns. What does this tell you about the US? The world's biggest superpower is losing influence. It can no longer dictate the rules of engagement to its allies. The United States is a declining power. The withdrawal in Afghanistan exposed American weaknesses. The invasion of Ukraine confirmed the limits of American influence. And our allies like Saudi Arabia are drifting away, signaling the end of the American era. WION is now available in your country.
All right. And Ken, let me ask, because you didn't say, do you have any clips you want to do after this? Well, after we
I have, okay. I have a clip. You want me to run it now?
Oh, no, let me just discuss.
Yeah, go ahead. Discuss this when we get to Ukraine. That's what I have. I mean, that's what I have.
Okay, right. Well, you can start with that, because I also, of course, have clips. But you can start that. Yeah, so again, this is, of course, rather interesting. Again, and, you know, another, well, one case of many of unexpected consequences of previous American foreign policy decisions with what's going on, you know. Again, all this, because of Biden's demonization of MBS in Saudi Arabia during the election, now he can't call on the Saudis to help with opening, pumping more oil. And again, on the other side, why would, if, they're not good friends with Biden, why would, it's much easier for the Saudis to sit back and, again, collect more money. Obviously, if they pump more oil, that means, again, they make less money because they're going to drive the price of oil down. So from there, again, especially if they have no dog in the fight between, Russia and Ukraine, again, and the Saudis have had a deal, it's called so-called OPEC plus deal with the Russians for a long time, not to increase oil production in order to have, and they had kind of had a deal going back to before COVID to work together, the Russians and the Saudis, to drive American shale and Canadian shale oil out of business by, at that point, raising oil prices. And, again, when things... sorry, I should say, remember when COVID happened and oil prices crashed at that one point, they stuck with their production in order to hurt our shale oil. Sorry, it was kind of the opposite was. Again, so they kept production up, so to undercut, fracked oil essentially. And a lot of, we talked about this back when we had the show with Otis. Mike will probably remember this. And Dennis, I think was, yeah. They drove a lot of the Texas, businesses out of business.
Alex, let's give it to Mike. Let's give it to the other members here. Go ahead, Mike.
No, first let me get a question for some information. This news clip we saw, was this from that rarest of commodities now, an actual straight news show, or was this
no, it's it's the WION channel, which is from India, and I think it's supposed to be a straight. Yeah,
is it one of the mainstream shows on?
Yeah, no, they're a pretty big channel in India. Yeah,
because it seemed. They, in other words, this whole thing about the end of the American Empire. That's an opinion in a lot of countries, Mike. So.
That's
no. But it's an opinion.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not straight news.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm
okay. Well, that part, yeah, that part you can object to. But again, there's
no. I'm trying to determine where this came from.
Yeah. No, it's similar to some of the programs I think we've seen it's this Gravitas program within, I guess, the channel. It's kind of like they have interviews. It's kind of like, we've used clips from the stream on Al Jazeera. It strikes me as a similar kind of program, again, of kind of like more in-depth discussions of topics. Although obviously this was a short clip. But yeah, my impression is it's that kind of program within, again, the bigger Indian network, which again is, as I said, just because, back when we were, doing a lot of talking about the China-India border conflict, that was one of the channels I kept going back to. And you could tell then they're rather conservative, pro-Modi government. But again, India is kind of a neutral position in the current war.
Let's see if we can get
without a dog in the fight, essentially.
Okay, Alex, let's see if we can get Steve and Dennis comment on this Middle Eastern playing their hand about the oil. What do you think, Steve?
I think that bin Salman I think that bin Salman is obviously an absolute ruler in the Western terms. We call him a dictator. He's put close relatives in jail, very comfortable jail, but he's put close relatives in jail. He killed Khashoggi. All Khashoggi was a former member. I think he was a member of the government, a journalist. Was he a member of the government, Alex?
He was a spokesman for the government at one point.
He was a spokesman.
Yeah. So I think part of that was,
The guy is a journalist here publishing in the Washington Post, which is, in my view, a very good, liberal democratic newspaper, but it's not, certainly not widely read in Saudi Arabia. And, bin Salman just killed him, and everybody knows he killed him. And Trump tried to make as little of it as possible. Now, bin Salman is dealing with a liberal democratic president. Whatever it is, I know that the United States is a capitalist country. I know that the United States is an imperial country. I know that the United States has the largest empire without holding on to land. I mean, the British did it and the French did it by holding on to land. The United States does it otherwise. I understand all that. At the same time, there are differences within capitalist countries that have bourgeois democracy. They generally have two parties, and this party is more different. Certainly presents some difficulties to bin Salman in dealing with both his foreign policy and his domestic policy, to the extent that there's any kind of discussion in Saudi Arabia about domestic policy. I don't know, but I think my guess is that in dealing with the United States, bin Salman's primary objective is to make things as difficult as he can for the Democratic Party and Joe Biden, hoping that he will get a very friendly Republican back in the White House on January 20th, 2025, whether it's Trump or somebody else. So I think in looking at what bin Salman is talking about, we have to look at it in that context. And I'm very happy to see my friend Alex Stavropoulos is nodding his head in agreement with what I'm saying. When I'm saying something and Alex is turning his head the other way, I tend to get worried.
Okay, let me ask you a follow-up question, Steve. What's the right position that the U.S. should have towards Saudi Arabia and its oil? What should our position be?
I think, well, it's very easy, sitting in this room for me to say that I think the primary position is that the United States should take a moral position towards Saudi Arabia and towards the awful way that that country is run. I mean, it's an absolute dictatorship. It's very personal. It's highly anti-woman and so on and so forth. in terms of trying to get more oil to deal with the current circumstance and the oil supply shortage that we have created in terms of Russia, there are other places to get additional oil, and the United States is looking at them, interestingly enough.
Oh, we lost Steve. So let's go to Dennis.
Dennis, is Dennis muted or not?
No, he's not muted.
Okay, so Dennis, okay, yeah, tell us what you think, Dennis.
I think that the Saudis are a horrific dictatorship, and the United States ought to distance itself from the Saudis instead of playing games with oil. And the question is, do we want to be ethical or not? And I think that the ruling class in this country does not want to be ethical or humanitarian. They're mainly concerned with making money, and that's very capitalist. I think we have to change the direction, and we need a movement in the streets that answers to that question. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Okay, back to you, Alex. What's your next clip?
Well, Ken, you said you had some clips, so I would pass.
Okay, I'll play my clip.
Let you to do one, yeah.
Guys,
all right, let me do it. Go ahead, Mike.
It's a topic, because I want to segue. If we bring this up, it comes up when we're going into Ukraine again. The oil, the gas prices have gone up. Okay, we're not getting much cooperation from Saudi Arabia, et cetera, et cetera. But we do remember that in the Middle East War in 1974, 73, I should say, the oil prices went up. There was the oil embargo, and then the war ended, and everything settled down, but the prices never went down. The key thing that will happen here, with the, okay, we know, everybody knows, they said, okay, until the Ukraine crisis is settled, we're going to have to bite the bullet and go with $4.29, whatever it is at the pump. But if the prices don't come down this time after the crisis passes, I think they may hopefully have overplayed their hand, and they might be driving people into other forms of energy, renewable energy, and away from gas dependency. So we'll see what happens. But I don't have any confidence that those prices, and I'm sure most of the people in the United States and Canada and Britain, all over the world, have very little confidence that those prices are ever going to come down once the crisis passes. Just thought I broach that into the Ukraine thing. Okay, go ahead.
Vladimir is sulking. He's looking pretty sad. His enemies are plotting from Minsk to Leningrad. Chechens making mischief. Journalists enraged. A story torn from Kafka. How we love to turn the page. Now Vladimir is scheming. He's turning all the wheels. Oligarchs and businessmen all cutting Kremlin deals. They're ripping off the country and buying mega yachts. Babushka swilling vodka while the whole damn country rots. He's bringing back the gulags like Stalin's glory days, and disappearing dissidents in Lubyanka's maze, purging all the journalists and jailing girly bands. He's Kremlin's evil impresario. Vladimir is putting on a show. Now Vladimir is swaggering like mafiosos do, sweeping through the Kremlin doors, a gangster through and through. No more perestroika, those wimpy days are lost. buried like his rivals in Siberian permafrost. Democracy so tiresome, such trouble to be free. Much better when whole games run by friendly KGB. And if you cross with Putin, he'll hunt you down with glee, purging you with pogroms and polonium in your tea. Now Vladimir is gloating. He knows he duped us all. He suckered us on Syria, and he's having such a ball. Whole damn world is watching now. Putin's got the stage. He's ravaging Crimea while his critics roar with rage. He's bringing back the gulags like Stalin's glory days, and disappearing dissidents in Lubyanka's maze, purging all the journalists and jailing girly bands. He's Kremlin's evil impresario. Oh, Vladimir is Putin on a show.
Bravo.
Let me play this.
Welcome back. So I was speaking just now about the creeping authoritarianism we're seeing from Biden and the Democrats, and someone who's been such a strong voice on that issue is former Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, who I'm delighted to say joins us now. Aloha, Tulsi. Happy New Year. How are you doing?
Aloha, Steve. It's always good to talk to you. Happy New Year to you as well.
So look, you've spoken out against this. It seems to be getting worse. The particularly chilling thing was this new I don't know what to call it, this frightening new move from the Justice Department. We saw the Deputy Attorney General earlier talking about anyone who is anti-authority being part of this move against domestic violent extremists. What do you make of that?
Yeah, Steve, I think it's really important to bold, highlight, and underline what he said. We have the Deputy Attorney General of the United States speaking to the American people about how they are standing up a domestic terrorism unit to support their efforts to target those who hold anti-government or anti-authority ideologies. When we stop and think about that for a second, what does that really mean? The authorities in our government, the Biden administration, are targeting Americans for holding anti-authority views. That is authoritarianism. And what does that mean to us here at home? We're supposed to just sit back passively, follow along, put those blinders on, and do whatever they tell us to do? That undermines the heart of our democratic republic. That undermines the essence of our Constitution, which says we have the freedom to challenge our authorities. We have the freedom to stand and protest, to ask questions, to demand accountability and answers. And if we lose that freedom, and this is where they're exposing their anti-liberty, anti-democracy mindset, which is so dangerous, because if we lose that, then we no longer have a democracy.
Totally. And actually, I completely agree with that. And I'd sort of take it further. I think that idea of challenging authority and, if you like, challenging conventional wisdom and what the powers that be, that's so central to America's success on every level, not just as a democracy. You could even put it into the sphere of science and art and industry and common startups. You know, I don't agree with the way they're doing it. I'm going to do things differently. It's part of America. Why do you think that the Democrats have so readily lurched into this authoritarianism?
You know, Steve, I think it comes from fear. Fear of losing this power that they are at least, you know, pretending to hold on to. Fear that people will question the decisions that they're making. Fear that those who challenge their authority are a direct threat to their power. And that is what is so dangerous, because it's coming from a place of fear rather than a place that is rooted in the fabric, in the heart, the essence of the Constitution of the United States of America, the very document that guides us and you know, reminds us who we are and what this country is all about. And when people are motivated by fear of losing power, you see the kinds of results that we're seeing, where they're willing to say or do whatever they feel they need to hold on to it, forgetting about the American people.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's so fantastic that you're speaking out so strongly on it. There's another issue that you've been in the lead on. It's a big issue. I know we don't have too much time, but I just would love your take because it's very much emerging as a big story, which is the whole situation. You know, it looks like we may be heading towards yet another entanglement in a foreign war with what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. Look, it's not a straightforward issue. My family's Hungarian. When the Soviets invaded Hungary and the West didn't come in to protect and fight back the Soviet forces, that caused a lot of, you know, left people with years of Soviet oppression. On the other hand, I think, would I be happy for my son to go and fight in Ukraine to protect their freedom? Frankly, no. And so the question I have for you is, how do we balance this? You know, we want to deter aggression, of course, but we don't want to get sucked into these military conflicts. You've got the intelligence services out there putting out all this information, looking like they're kind of wanting to take us into war again. What do we do?
Well, I think this brings us back to the last point, is our leaders should be acting in the best interest of the American people and our country. And unfortunately, in this White House, we have warmongers and people like Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken, who were had a very strong hand in being the architects of regime change wars in Iraq, in Libya, in Syria, and they're the ones who are influencing the decisions that are being made by this White House. They are stoking tensions. They are escalating the situation that can only lead us down a more dangerous path that directly undermines the interests of the American people in our country. Let's be real about what we're dealing with here, Steve. We're talking about the United States and Russia, two great nuclear-armed powers in the world. There is only one place that conflict ends. That ends in destruction of this world and life as we know it. Don't be naive. Don't be shy about pointing out exactly what is at stake. And that's what the American people need to know. And that's what people in the White House and leaders in Congress from both sides of the aisle refuse to tell them the truth about.
Very, very well said. We've got to kind of calm it all down. It goes back to what we were saying earlier. He talks about lowering the temperature, Biden. On this as well, he's raising it. Tulsi, thank you so much for being...
No, once she stopped being a Democrat, she's clearly always just been a political opportunist. So back when she was running as a Democrat, running for president, she was this super progressive, and then, not anti certain wars, regime change wars, and I agreed with her on, I agreed with her on, not wanting to fight, getting out of Syria and so on. But no, she's exposed herself as she's just. I don't think she has any political principles. This is just, it shows that she never had any She never had any real ideology. She's just doing what she thinks is gonna. Keep her on Fox News now, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I don't want to date her either. What do you think about what she said, the content, not your opinion of her politics? What about what she was arguing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's some truth to that,
what part of it was true?
It's neither Biden nor Trump that's, creating...
Forget the politics. Stop it with the personalities. What about
the point I'm making again? The point I'm trying to make is that it's there is an increase in authoritarian, the government has become, more oppressive, and more authoritarian. Both parties have, we're seeing right now a wave of censorship. Not just RT getting taken down, but people that were, some of the personalities on RT are now being deplatformed. Lee Camp got deplatformed from Spotify just because he had a show on RT, even though he actually has denounced Putin's invasion of Russia. So this is about, this is not about, fighting Russia or whatever, not just about fighting Russia. It's about using that as another excuse to increase censorship, get rid of dissident, especially anti-war voices. And
so you agree with what the point she was making?
Yeah.
What about Mike? Yeah. What do you think, Mike?
Sorry, I just had to unmute. No, I don't agree. First of all, Putin, I mean, they just, I think a couple of days ago, Putin managed to push through this new ruling that anybody who calls the operation the what they call an operation. If they call it a war, they can get 15 years in prison. Doesn't mean they will get the full 15 years, but I mean, they can basically be put in prison for the same length of time as you could be for armed robbery. So, yeah, is this a form of censorship? I don't know. I think it's well, it is a form of censorship, but it's a form of censorship catering to the mood of the country as well as what the government wants. But it's not as egregious as the censorship that's going on in Russia right now. I mean, that's draconian. This is just pretty much par for the course in the United States. But there also the fact, I mean, when we talk about RT, I'm sorry, RT is really just a propaganda outlet right now. Now, this is not to say we don't have our own propaganda problems, but I mean, I don't know if you should ban RT, but you should make it very clear that what they're saying, you know, should be viewed with skepticism, because it is basically propaganda. It's like if you're listening to, you know, some armed forces radio or something like that, you're not going to get the whole story. So that being said, also she certainly does seem to be coming across as a political opportunist. In other words, whatever, even if it goes against the grain, if it goes against the grain in a way that elevates her profile into the public, that may well be what, doing what she's doing. But I think he articulated what's always been an ongoing problem with the United States, which is that why should we worry? Why should we get involved in other people's problems? We should just be worrying about ourselves and, you know, stick our heads in the sand. And of course, as we know from COVID, if you just stick your head in the sand, pretend something's not going on, you wind up getting your ass kicked. So this is, I mean, this is typical. I mean, America did this right before, you know, during World War II. We were Johnny-come-latelys to almost every situation in which there was a certain amount of moral or ethical consideration to the actual struggle. The thing about the nuclear war, yeah, we don't want to get into a nuclear war, but we've got a very, you know, interesting situation. Interesting is a way of putting it mildly, which is that if you've got somebody on the other side who's saying, let me do whatever the hell I want to do, or I'm going to launch my nuclear weapons. Well, if we let him do whatever he wants to do, he could just, you know, take over country after country after country. I mean, if Hitler had nuclear weapons in 1939, what would we have done? I mean, yeah, you don't want the whole planet blown up, but we got a point where we just have to play a better game of poker than Putin is playing, which is not hard at this point. He's not playing that well, but we've got to discuss.
Mike, you muted yourself somehow.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you got cut off.
No, I was just.
Wait, oh, Ken, I think you're muting everybody.
Ken is muting himself.
Or, well, I think Mike's.
Yeah, I'm trying to mic. I'm trying to mute Mike so Steve can talk. Mike, you had a long venue. Okay. Come on, we know what you want. Steve, what's your viewpoint on the? You didn't see the whole video, but the question is the U.S. censoring people?
And you want us to wrap up, and we'll do that.
Okay. The last 3 squeaks of that one. We do not have government censorship in this country. Any, you know, like in Russia, there is government censorship, and for Putin to remove RT shows how desperate Putin is in terms of dealing both with domestic and with foreign opinion. And I'll tell a story, my RT story, which I told some time ago, but I'll tell it again because maybe different people are listening this time. Leading up to the 2016 election, because I publish regularly on a site called the Greenville Post, which is pretty left, I got calls on a regular basis from RT, maybe 3-4 times a year. But somebody would call up from RT, and they would ask me to comment on some aspect of American politics. So I got a call during the 2016 campaign, and it was clear from the outset that the RT interviewer wanted me to say nice things about Trump and not nice things about Clinton. And although I've been a critic of the Clintons forever, from back in the 1980s, compared to Trump, I was saying not nice things about Trump. And the guy kept pushing me, and I wouldn't say nothing. I said, no, I don't think he should be. I think he has dictatorial tendencies. He's obviously a racist. I mean, things everybody, any reasonable political observer could see. I wrote my first column about Trump and fascism. I'm very proud of it. In late 2015, there were a few other people talking about it then, but I was one of a small group. The title of that column was, is it Hair Trump, H-A-I-R, or Hair Trump, H-E-R-R? We know which one it is, both. But the point about RT is, I never got another call from RT after that particular conversation. And I think that was, since I'd been getting calls from them on a regular basis, every 2-3 months, no more calls. So I think for Putin to be canning RT, as I said at the beginning, shows on what shaky ground he is. Now, are we talking about right now? Are we talking about? Well, we're talking about censorship. Okay, when we get to talking about Putin and what the future might hold for him, I've got what I think is a pithy comment, but I will save it until we get to that topic.
Excuse me, so you don't consider that the U.S. the administration is putting pressure on private organizations like CNN and MSNBC to censor anything that makes excuses for Russia's invasion into Ukraine?
I have not seen any. That may be happening. There may be, behind the scenes, that sort of thing going on. If that's what Gabbard claims, maybe she has evidence to support it. I haven't seen anything like that. I mean, the point is that MSNBC and CNN have a particular political perspective. We know what it is, and it's very consistent.
But
I want to bring up one point.
Let me just finish it.
Go ahead.
The paragraph. We know what that is. And they're very consistent. And since the start of this whole thing, they've been very anti-Putin. They've been very supportive of Ukraine. The interesting thing is that the channel on which Gabbard has been appearing for quite some time now, after being a candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination for a while, being on a channel which never, certainly didn't support her when she was trying to be the Democratic presidential nominee. She's on that channel now. That channel seems to be changing its position on the, I'll call it the Putin-Ukraine war, because it's not Russia-Ukraine, it's Putin-Ukraine. We can talk, I'm happy to have an opportunity to talk about that later. I mean, all of a sudden, she's on a channel that's changing its position almost from day to day. So I don't give very much credence to Tulsi Gabbard's claim that there is some kind of government censorship in this country. There certainly isn't. The government may express opinions about what they'd like to hear, but there's certainly nothing like, you are not going to be on television ever again as long as I am president of Russia.
Don't you believe in Chomsky, the Chomsky-Herman, manufacturing consent propaganda model? That they don't need, there doesn't need to be explicit censorship to achieve, government talking points being all on. Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that. Okay. And this is a capitalist country. This capitalist country presently is run by a bourgeois, democratic, constitutional, in terms of the U.S. Constitution, which is not exactly democratic, as we all know, a small d, government. And of course, they have an influence over, communists.
Yeah.
Real communists. I don't mean people who label themselves communists. I mean real communists in terms of people who understand the Communist Manifesto and understand what I think is the most important book Lenin wrote, which was The State and Revolution. I'll say we don't get a chance to talk to the public. Of course we don't. And there are plenty of other leftists. I mean, the Green Party doesn't get much of much exposure. DSA doesn't get much exposure. We live in a capitalist country where, by and large, the public sources are controlled by the ruling class. In this country, there's a major split in the ruling class right now. We can get to that some other time. But I do understand that, Alex, yes. And as I say, I'm always very happy when I'm talking and your head's going up and down. Right. When I'm talking and your head's going from side to side, I'm not so happy.
Well, let's see if Dennis has another opinion, since he hasn't chimed in. I think he does. It looks like. So unmute yourself, Dennis, and give us your comments. You're still muted, Dennis. Oh, wait, no. You there, Dennis?
I don't have much of a thought about this at this moment. I think that we need to. The United States is self-destructing, according to Michael Hudson, in Counterpunch yesterday or the day before. And we ought to build a movement that pushes the United States into paralysis as an imperial power. That's what I think. And anything that helps the ruling class in this country should be opposed. I think we have a chance to do something important in this historical period, and we ought to think about doing it. And it's really our move that counts more than the ruling class at this point. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, hey, Mike, do you want to close off on this before we go back to something new from Alex?
Well, let's put it this way. There's always going to be some form of censorship. It goes back to you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. To what degree it is, I agree with Steve on the fact that, no, we don't have, shall we say, official government censorship. I mean, government can put pressure or attempt to influence private organizations, but we don't. I mean, we can't do here what Putin can obviously do there, which is just basically cancel. Just say you're off the air. You're off the air. Not that easy to do that here. So, yeah, that basically sums it up. Go on.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. So, Alex, take us forward into the future. Okay. What's your next thing?
So, one person that I think, well, not just me, but I'm guessing a lot of the people on here greatly respect from the left is Tariq Ali, and well-known author and commentator. And he went on, I think it's today, Democracy Now!, to give a kind of a pacifist perspective and a leftist perspective on all this. Although I don't know if well, I'm not sure if he's full-out pacifist, but anyway, he talks here about the thing, including the Russian peace movement, and it's not supportive of either NATO or Putin's invasion. So found this quite interesting. I will play it. Well, not all of it, but a good part of it.
Now, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. As we continue to look at Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we go to London. On Tuesday, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky gave a historic virtual address to the British House of Commons.
We will not give up and we will not lose. We will fight till the end. We will fight at sea. We will fight in the air. We will defend our land, whatever the cost. We will fight in the forests, in the fields, on the shores, in the cities and villages, on the streets. We will fight on the hills. Strengthen the sanctions against the country, terrorist Russia, and recognize it as a terrorist country. Find the way to make our Ukrainian skies safe. Do what you can, what you have to, what is obliged by the greatness of your country and your people.
Ukrainian President Zelensky received a standing ovation from the British lawmakers. Joining us now from London is historian, activist, filmmaker, author Tariq Ali. He's on the editorial committee of the New Left Review. Days before the Russian invasion, he wrote a piece headlined "News from NATO Land." On Sunday, he took part in an international day of action against the war in Ukraine. Welcome back to Democracy Now!, Tariq. Can you talk about what Zelensky's message was, what Britain is doing, and overall your response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine?
Amy, let's start with Zelensky's message. It was, a propaganda message, quite honestly, using some famous phrases from Churchill's speeches. But forgetting it wasn't Churchill's speeches that won the Second World War. It was, as the whole world knows or should know, the key battles fought by the Red Army on Russian soil and what is now Ukrainian soil that destroyed the spinal cord of Hitler's Germany and led to defeat. We should never forget that, whatever the rhetoric. The basic purpose of Zelensky's address to the House of Commons, clearly organized by the Foreign Office, etc., was to plead for a no-fly zone. That's the key demand of the Ukrainians, but it's a demand that NATO has intelligently so far rejected because it knows that to impose a no-fly zone over the Ukraine at the present time could lead to a mega escalation of the war and possibly the use of nuclear weapons. So that particular demand isn't going to get anywhere. It's largely pressure on Putin, but Putin knows what he's doing. Now, as far as the war itself is concerned, Amy, how will it end? In fact, nobody knows. Neither Putin, who launched it, nor NATO, who have created a situation over the last 30 years, as some of the more intelligent US commentators have been telling us now for a long time, has finally reached its apogee. It will end here, whatever the solution. My own feeling is that Putin's attempt to mimic the United States and pretend that Russia is a great imperial power is foolhardy. It won't work. Apart from anything else, apart from the fact that he is isolated from large chunks of the countries around him. If you look at the US, if you look at the GDP of Russia, it's 1.4 trillion, less even than Italy, and minuscule compared to the United States, which is on 20.9 trillion. So how can you even attempt to mimic the United States, even were it a good thing, which it obviously isn't? So I think it's backfired, and I think the key question now we have to ask is the following. How should we try and end this war? Further escalation, further armaments, pouring in weapons is going to make conditions worse, principally for the people of Ukraine. They're the ones who are suffering the most, and it's the refugees and the ordinary citizens who don't want this who are suffering. And so the question has to be asked, is a bloody partition the only solution? And if it is, then why not start the process now? Neither side wants it, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't argue for it, just like we argue for ending fossil fuels. It's no more utopian than that. So it's something that nobody is arguing. In Britain, I mean, just look at it. In Russia, we've seen the emergence of a really courageous, powerful peace movement, for which one has total sympathy. They're being beaten up, they're being locked up. In Britain, both Boris Johnson and his understudy, the Labour leader Keir Starmer, have attacked Stop the War. In Russia, Putin tells them you're agents of NATO, which they deny and say we don't support NATO. Here in Britain, Johnson and Starmer attack the peace movement and saying, by bringing in criticisms of NATO, you're supporting Putin, which we deny as well. It was George Bush who started this whole thing. If you're not with us and our wars, you're with the terrorists. And we said it wasn't an acceptable way of arguing, and we refused to accept that divide, as we're doing now. So the key thing politicians in Europe and elsewhere should be asking are, how are we going to end this tragedy? I don't think Putin, who miscalculated, I think, disastrously, what he could achieve. I mean, it's obvious now from information coming out, he thought it would be a quick sortie. And they met with resistance which they weren't prepared for. I mean, to give you just one example, Putin sent policemen, you know, his police guard, people who do special duties as security into Kiev, who were beaten back. Quite a lot of them were killed. So it's not in anyone's interest, not in the interest, certainly not in the interests of Russia. So we could have a number of things coming out of this conflict, a bloody partition of the Ukraine, which I think is better than a continuing war. And Putin could be toppled from within Russia, because people in Russia are beginning to see exactly what is going on. And some of my more utopian friends, Russian philosophers and activists, are telling me we are hoping that he will suffer a blow at the hands of the Ukrainians, not NATO. And so it might trigger off a new revolution in Russia itself. I don't believe any of this. I think effectively the Russian elite will get very angry if this war goes on endlessly. Because how can you maintain control of a country which doesn't want to be occupied? NATO has just learned that after 20 years in Afghanistan, or I hope they have learned that, and will not attempt to repeat performance anywhere in Europe. Putin should have learned that from Russia's own experiences in Afghanistan, but he clearly hasn't. How can you occupy a country without keeping thousands and thousands and thousands of your own troops there? Even if you set up a puppet government, they will need the backing of Russian troops. So I'm sure these things are being discussed seriously. Or, Amy, you could do what the US did in relation to Venezuela, having failed to topple the Chavista governments and Maduro. They actually created an imaginary government with a total imbecile, Guaido, as its president, recognized him, got their European friends to do the same. No one in South America takes it seriously. No one. So you can imagine, an imagined president in an imagined country. Putin could try the same. I wouldn't advise it. Be a total failure. And the third thing to point out, that whereas in the past, you had a situation where Ukrainians were fairly evenly divided between being not with Russia, but broadly speaking on that side, or broadly speaking, being with the United States and its military organization, NATO. It was 40-40, it was at one stage even higher, 50-50. Now we don't know, but I would suggest, from speaking to some of my friends from Ukraine, that no one wants a permanent occupation by the Russians, or very few people do, and that there are probably more people now in favor of NATO than there were before.
And so, Tariq, I wanted to ask you this issue of the response of those on the left. There's an article in the New York Times today that says socialist response to the war in Ukraine has put some Democrats on edge. And it's openly critical of the Democratic Socialists of America for claiming that the imperialist expansionism of NATO helped to fuel the crisis that exists now. There are already candidates running against people like Jamal Bowman on a foreign policy position and attacking DSOC. What should be the response of those on the left to this invasion and the situation right now?
I think we can't dissociate the invasion completely from NATO's aggressive policies over the last few decades. I mean, they were warned that don't try it on in the Ukraine, and yet last November, Biden went ahead and not more or less, said that the protocols were all ready to incorporate the Ukraine into NATO. Now, it's not just the left that is saying this. You have to understand, Thomas Friedman in the New York Times, their star columnist, cannot by any stretch of the imagination be said to be on the left. Yet his two columns in February were very critical. And he quoted a very interesting piece from George Kennan, who, you know, is the father of Cold War historiography, of the real old Cold War. And Kennan warned some years ago that if you carry on like this, you will end up with a very ugly situation in the Ukraine. Then you have other examples, that in 2008, Condoleezza Rice in Bush's White House was told clearly by an intelligence official that he had been in Russia for 2.5 years and had met nobody. He said, I met everyone, people who hated Putin, liberals, people in the military, and none of them supported NATO in the Ukraine. So he said, cleverly and intelligently, move back from that position. This man who said this, William Burns, is currently director of the Central Intelligence Agency.
Okay, so honestly, it's another few minutes, but I think Tariq has given us quite a bit to discuss. So I'll open it to anybody.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
I'll go first. Totally agree with everything he said.
Okay, so Steve?
Yeah, I as I said last week, I have a different position on why Putin started this war, which then really puts aside the issue of NATO. Certainly, there was an agreement after agreement that was made first with the Soviet Union and then with the Russian government about the encroaching NATO expansion eastward, which was broken. And I have to say, I've been writing about this for a long time. But I don't think that the threat of NATO to expand into the Ukraine. You came, I came. I'm gonna need one sooner. The way my knees are going. I don't think that's the reason that Putin did this. He already has 2 NATO countries directly on his border. That's Estonia and Latvia. There are a whole bunch of other countries that are sort of on the border. That is, they're on the border of Belarus. So I don't really think that it's Ukraine. I think that Putin used it as an excuse. And I've said this before. I've started to hear one or two commentators, I don't remember their names, saying similar things. I think that the reason that Putin did this is because he thought that by doing this, he could make the world safe for plutocracy. He has got one of the most centered plutocracies in the world. I think he thought that he would bring along Hungary, that he would bring along Turkey, that he had a chance of bringing along China. And for the last couple of weeks, as we know, China has been, trying to sit in the middle. And in the last couple of days, it has now essentially been joining the anti-Putin forces. I think it was Krugman who pointed out that if nothing else, the physical connections between the European part of Russia, which has most of its population and its industry, is separated by 3,500 miles of really, I mean, that is a really, the Trans-Siberian Railroad, I haven't seen anything that they've improved it very much. That's a really creaky railroad. And for whatever reason, we've all seen that China is moving towards the Western position on Ukraine. But I think this is what Putin wanted to do. I think he wanted to say, I'm an autocrat, and you guys, you've got these so-called liberal democracies, and you've got various kinds of connections between each other, but I want to start making a formal alliance. That, of course, also includes somebody like bin Salman. He already has, what's his name, and the horrible, brutal guy, really brutal guy in Syria. So I think that's what he was trying to do. He seriously miscalculated. He obviously did. He thought he was going to do this. He didn't. Now, different countries have different reasons for not joining in an international plutocratic organization, starting with Hungary. Orban does face an election in a couple of months. All of the opposition parties in Hungary, there's a wide variety of politics among them, they've all joined in a coalition to try to defeat Orban. Now, if Orban manages to pull out a win using partly Trumpist techniques to do that, there's never going to be another election in Hungary. But who knows? I mean, he might lose. So he's being very careful. Turkey's fiddling about. First, they said, no, Russian warships won't be able to go through the Bosphorus. Now, the last I saw, and Alex is always more up on these things than I am, I think they said, okay, Russian warships can go through the Bosphorus. Is that correct, Alex?
I'm not sure about that. I haven't seen. I do know that they are not going to well, at least they've said they're not going to sanction Russia. They're not joining in the NATO.
But they're certainly not, they're certainly not doing what Putin wanted them to do, which was line up with the Russians. And of course, Putin claims to know Russian history very well. Russia and Turkey have never gotten along, at all. So anyway, I think so that failed. I think what he's trying to do now is depopulate Ukraine of Ukrainians, of Ukrainian-speaking Ukrainians. I mean, we see now Ukraine, I think, had a pre-war population of 14 million. There are 2 million plus Ukrainian refugees, mainly in Poland, also in Slovakia. I don't know how many Hungary has actually taken. Some of them have also gone to Romania. I think that's what this is about. I think the bombing of a children's hospital, actually, I've seen a couple of people on the left-wing listserv that I'm on claiming that that was a false flag operation, that was done by Ukrainian terrorists, that they shot up their own children's hospital. Anything's possible. I find that hard to believe. I think that the ultimate solution is something that Mr. Ali hinted at. And that is, of course, I've been reading him for years. A very impressive man, and what an impressive speaker. And boy, does he handle the English language. He is just handles it beautifully. Oh yeah, I wanted to say one thing about President Zelensky's appearance before the House of Commons. That has never happened before. There has never been an instance of a foreign leader speaking directly to the House of Commons. How much does that mean?
Is that right, Mike, to your knowledge, since you're the resident Anglophile here?
No, there have been foreign speakers.
Oh, there have. I read somebody who then I was for somebody else. All right. Anyway, the point I want to make is, all right. The final point I want to make is that I think that there are an increasing number of members of the ruling class, and there is a ruling class. They're very, and there's also a military elite in Russia right now. They're very much subordinated to Putin. I think that they are already looking for the Russian equivalent of von Stauffenberg to come along without a very heavy desk leg between him and the dictator. And I'd love to hear what Alex has to say about that.
Well, but Mike, I think, is jumping to say something. So let's let Mike,
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to say that I was not impressed by him. Partially because he comes across like a pompous ass to me, but the fact is that, to me, the equivalent of the left-wing equivalent of William F. Buckley, who my personal feeling was I couldn't stand for more than 30 seconds. But he also made you can tell where shall we say, the problems with what he's talking about, the problems in his calculations and in his deductions, when he said, as if it's a fact, that Russia was responsible for winning World War II. Obviously, he was talking about against Germany, but that in itself is a dangerous misconception, dangerous at this time, and I'll tell you why. On land, Russia did the Red Army, Soviet Union, which included people from the Ukraine, but the Soviet Union did most of the fighting and took on most of the German forces on land. But in the sea and the air, it was predominantly done by the West. It is highly doubtful that the Soviet Union could have won the war against Nazi Germany, just against Nazi Germany, without the West. So in other words, his assumption, again, his pompous, almost arrogant assumption that, everybody knows this, when it's not even true, at least the way he put it, then leads to other deductions. Then he started talking about, well, maybe we should just, in other words, subdivide the Ukraine. First of all, the way it will be subdivided, if Putin agrees to subdivision, Ukraine would have no access to any large body of water other than a river. In other words, the way it's going right now, I know if you've seen the maps, if he pushes on Odessa, he will basically cut Ukraine off from the sea, from any sea. So in that respect, no, it's not that simple an answer. Second of all of this is done at the expense of the Ukrainian people. Ukraine was a separate country. It's not a part of Russia. And it is still not a part of Russia. There was an unprovoked, and by unprovoked, I'm not talking about NATO adding fuel to it or whatever, or something. And I agree with Steve. I think the whole NATO thing is more of an excuse, because from what I had gathered beforehand, Ukraine wasn't getting into NATO anytime in the near future. And that was because of NATO's preference. Ukraine might have wanted it, but NATO was not too keen on it for the obvious reasons. So the fact of the matter is that he's making these assumptions and said, well, we could just subdivide the country. wait a second. It's not his country. This is their country. And yes, what Zelensky said to Parliament was propaganda, and it was geared towards the UK by quoting almost literally, you know, quoting Churchill's famous speech. But of course, he didn't. Zelensky didn't mention anything about fighting them on the beaches, which obviously they're not doing. But the fact is that, yeah, okay, you're going to have that kind of propaganda in a war. You're going to have to do that. Zelensky's got to pull out every stop he can in order. I mean, his country has been invaded and is partially overrun. Not only that, the major cities are being bombarded and are in danger. There's a bloodbath already going on, and it's in danger of becoming a massive bloodbath. And by the way, the idea of a false flag of the bombing of the hospital, if the observations by the news crews are true, and they weren't doctored footage or anything like that, no, that was in a dumb bomb, as they call it, not a smart bomb. So it may not be, it may be collateral damage. It's horrible collateral damage, but it may be collateral damage. In other words, it may have not been dropped on that hospital on purpose. But the fact is that once you start fighting in urban areas, and once you have the population, you know, up in arms against you, then you're going to be killing the population.
Okay, let's move on, Mike. Come on.
And that's wait. One other point. One short point. The thing is that what this guy is trying to say, what we should be doing here, one aspect we're not taking is we have to see this from the point of view, at least in part, from the point of view of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. And that's what nobody seems to be doing. It seems like everybody wants to make their decision for them. It's not ours to make.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Could we move on? I want to move on this to a different aspect that I haven't heard anybody mention, but it is in the news article. There are accusations. First of all, there's 2 points. I've heard this in alternative news media, that when Ukraine yielded up its nuclear weapons back to Russia after the USSR fell apart, Russia made a proclamation that they would never threaten or invade the Ukraine in exchange for getting back the nuclear weapons. So that kind of like negates any claims that Putin has that he can walk into Ukraine for whatever reasons. A.
That's correct. Ken, that's correct. It's in writing. We've seen it. It's in an official document. You're absolutely correct.
And who was in charge of Russia at the time? Was it
Yeltsin? The drunk.
Yeltsin. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay,
right.
But now on the other side, switch back. I think you do have to take the viewpoint of all parties, including Putin and including the Russian population and the generals and everybody. So there are allegations, again, in the alternative media, that I can't pronounce his name, the current president of the Ukraine Zelensky has put his opposition in jail. I think it was Tulsi Gabbard who was saying it, that it's not a democracy because...
That's true. He also shut down pro-Russian TV stations.
Yeah.
And in fact, when he jailed the opposition, the pro-Russian opposition leader, because his polls have gone so far down. I don't know. I think this was 2018 or 2019.
Right, and let us not forget,
the opposition party was beating him in the polls, so they weren't a fair election.
Let us not forget the Ukraine's involvement in the 2016 election, whatever that mess was all about. That Joe Biden was there trying to get a corruption committee going. So it's not clean hands. These guys did not come out of a Disney movie. They're not the Seven Dwarfs. Ukraine has a history too. And they were on the side of Germany during World War II, I think. Anyhow, wait a minute. Let me finish, Mike. Mike, just hold it a minute. So I'm just saying that I'm getting upset about the fact that the majority of the legacy media and everybody in the country, I don't mean everybody, a majority are wearing blue and yellow. We're all behind the Ukraine. Come on, pick up your flags, pick up your weapons. Let's save us from the Russians. All on one side. We could do the same thing for Yemen versus Saudi Arabia, or one of the 5 different battles going on in Africa. Or we could have done the same thing when Yugoslavia fell apart. Hey, 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 for the Syrians. Hey, hey, for the Bosnians. Taking side in a conflict. Each side has its issues, and each side has, this is my land, and so forth. This is common. It happens all over the world. So taking on sides on this is really annoying. It's like, we're for the New York Yankees. Fuck the Dodgers. I don't want to hear anybody talking about the Dodgers. Don't talk to me if you're for the Dodgers. I'm for the Yankees. If you're not for the Yankees, you're not an American. Now I've heard that rhetoric coming from different politicians, but it's definitely being pushed very strongly on the mainstream media. And when I say that, whenever they refer to Russia, they say it's an atrocity, they're vicious, they're violent, they're criminal. That's all I hear. And that the president of Ukraine is standing up. It's inspiring to listen to him. Yeah, sure. It's inspiring to listen to Maxine Waters too. It's like, come on. Aren't we a little bit more adult than that? Not to confront these things with who's the cutest, which animals. Let's protect the deers, but not the lizards, because the lizards aren't that attractive. So let's stand for the Ukrainians because they're cute. They're like the 7 dwarfs, not the Russians. They drink vodka. They're drunks. They're rapists. So this kind of vilification and aggrandizement from the mainstream media, I consider it embarrassing for the journalists, quote, journalists on the mainstream media, not to have an objective viewpoint. I like the practical politics. That's what I liked about Tariq Ali. He's talking pragmatically. Pragmatically, do you want to fight, or let them have what they already got, which are those 2 provinces on the east? Let them have access to to Crimea, so that they can get water in, and that they have a warm water port. Concede, and you can steal it back later. Why fight now? Why have this battle now? And you could just promise no NATO. Why not compromise instead of fighting and threatening
a nuclear war? Let me put up.
I'm done.
Let me put up an article to confirm that he arrested his opposition.
No, wait, Alex. Did he arrest all of his opposition or some?
Well, this happened. Remember, he arrested former President Poroshenko.
Yeah.
Before the war started, the courts again rejected, but he was trying to arrest his. And here from DW, which again, Deutsche Welle, so this is back in, I think, I don't see a date. Oh, wait, no, 2020, March 20, I think that's either March or February 2021. He banned 3 Russian opposition TV. And later, he arrested the head of the pro-Russian Ukrainian party.
Zoom in or read it. Read it out loud.
Okay. Here. 3 pro-Russian TV channels have gone off air in Kyiv after pro-Western President Volodymyr Zelensky signed a Ukrainian Security Council decree imposing sanctions for 5 years on 8 media and TV companies. Stations affected were ZIK, News 1, and 112 Ukraine. Broadcasts were only available on Tuesday night via video hosting platform YouTube, reported by Russian news agency TASS. It identified the channel's owners as Taras Kozak, a lawmaker and member of the pro-Russian opposition platform For Life Party, quoting him as describing Zelensky's move as an act of blatant censorship. Kozak is named in a decree appendix with his assets, trading operations, and transfer of copyright blocked also for 5 years. In Ukraine, the channels are considered to be pro-Russian messengers anchored in the nation's war-scarred east and south. Zelensky's spokeswoman Yulia Mendel said these media have become one of the tools of war against Ukraine, so they are blocked in order to protect national security, adding that evidence had emerged of their being funded from Russia. Okay. So banned pro-Russian TV. So again, well, obviously that makes the argument that Ukraine is this perfect democracy untrue.
Nobody's saying that Ukraine was perfect or that they didn't ban these channels, and if they indeed banned it for those reasons, yes, that is a form of that certainly is censorship. Although if they were getting funded by the Russian government, and if they were if they were funding Russian propaganda through there, and if they thought that a war was imminent, then you can do it. In times of crisis, countries, including the United States, have done the same thing. However, the fact is that, well, first of all, I have to give a little corrective, one of many to Ken. The fact is, Ukraine did not fight on the side of Nazi Germany for very good reason. Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. So from May 1941 on, Ukraine was obviously fighting against Nazi Germany. This is not to say that the Nazis were able to recruit members of the Ukrainian population, actual Ukrainians, to fight on their side for a variety of reasons, some of them not quite as nice as the others. But the fact is, no, Ukraine was fighting against Nazi Germany.
I found the article about the arrest of the opposition leader here back in May 2021.
An opposition leader, okay,
and accused him of treason.
Yeah, but nobody said. Well, first of all, treason. If they actually had evidence that he had committed treason, fine. If they didn't, then hopefully
he's still under house arrest. They haven't brought him to trial, so no evidence has even been
right.
presented.
So the idea is, but he's going to get a trial, and hopefully, I doubt it will be the equivalent of a show trial in the Stalin's time. But the fact is that all of this. In other words, they took action against the opposition, but they didn't actually arrest all of the opposition. You didn't see tens of thousands. I assume the opposition wasn't just a couple of hundred people. They didn't arrest tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians and send them to gulags or something like that. It's not the same. Again, it's not. Ken is worried that, oh, it's this perfect society against this totally evil society. No, one side is more wrong than the other. That's all it comes down to. And basically that during the Second World War, the United States was a segregated military. The United States had racism, horrible racism in the country. Nazi Germany was far worse, okay? We hadn't gotten to the point, the United States hadn't gotten to the point where we had concentration camps and death camps set up for the victims of our racial injustice. So the fact is, no, you're not going to say one side is perfect and the other side is totally horrible, totally wrong. There are people in Russia. The artistic director of the Meyerhold Theater, 2 days into the invasion, resigned because she said she didn't want to work for the murderer Putin. She didn't want to take any pay for it. There are plenty of people in Russia, plenty of people who are still with the possibility of serving 15 years in prison, are still out there protesting in the street. So it's not all one thing and all the other. But the fact is, if you have to take a side, you don't take a side with, you don't take the side of the person who's doing the most egregious, horrible things. You don't take their side against somebody who is doing, not perfect, but.
Thank you for the lesson in morality about whose side to get on. Both sides may be wrong.
Well, excuse me. You can say, well, Ken, in World War II, if somebody stood up and said, well, both sides could be wrong, what do you, I mean, you're going to say, you know, both sides could be wrong. Let Hitler take half of what he wants. I mean, was that, you know, there comes a point when you have to say, hey, one side has to be stopped. Now,
okay, thank you. But you're saying no negotiations, no accommodation to Russia's concern about NATO. Do not back off.
Wait.
They have no right to tell Ukraine what to do.
Ken, are you asking if I'm saying that?
It sounds like it.
No. Well, then you got to take the wax out of your ears. I didn't say anything about negotiations. You have to have negotiations. They are negotiating. But the fact is, you can't negotiate and tell the Ukrainians, like, okay, I'll tell you what, just give up half of your country and, you know, and all of your military, and just do what we tell you to do, and then we'll end the fighting.
So what was it that Tariq Ali said that you disagreed with?
Say no.
What did you disagree with about Tariq Ali? Besides, you don't like his mustache. What did he say that you disagreed with?
75% of what he said.
What? What did he say?
Dividing the country. I just said it, Ken. You're not listening.
Yeah, I'm listening.
He talked about dividing the country, which I think is ridiculous.
Okay.
Basically cutting Ukraine in half. I'm not talking about the rebel enclaves all the way on the, you know, the southerly eastern border. They're talking about subdividing the country. He's also talking about the fact that, yeah, I agree with the fact that it was a foolish move on Putin's part, but putting all the blame onto NATO, I'm sorry, just doesn't wash.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on. Come on. Both of us have talked too much. Let's go to Steve and Alex and Dennis. Yeah. I'm muting myself.
Dennis, go to Dennis.
Thank you.
No, let's go to Dennis because he hasn't spoken.
Dennis we might have knocked Dennis out. No, oh wait, no, he's up. He's up. Unmute Dennis. You're still muted, Dennis. You gotta hit the right button. Still muted.
There he is.
Yeah.
We ought to, as always, I think that we ought to take a lot of initiative on the left, and we should be calling for peace, and we should be calling for basically for peace. I'll just leave it at that.
Can I say a couple of words? I'll unmute.
If Alex has got to speak. You know, get a chance.
I'm fine for Steve, and Steve actually muted himself. You were unmuted before Steve.
Okay. Yeah, just to I don't know. I didn't hear Tariq Ali saying that the Ukraine should be divided in half. I didn't hear that, and that has not been well. The Russians at this point are not making clear demands about what they would like to have anyway. I mean, I haven't heard anything from them. The pre-war demands had to do mainly with no NATO. We want Crimea being transferred to Russian control, recognized internationally, which I happen to agree with, and I did at the time, and I'll explain in a minute why. And then dealing with the eastern predominantly Russian-speaking provinces. I heard, I think it was yesterday, that President Zelensky said that he would be willing to talk with Russia about about a settlement, and I think he said, and Alex and Ken listen to this more, maybe Mike too, more closely than I do, but I'm pretty sure he said that he would be willing to essentially give up any talk of joining NATO. Now, whether that's followed by, for the foreseeable future, or for the next 10 years or forever. I don't know, but he certainly is willing to put Ukrainian membership in NATO into negotiations. I think, by the way, that that's a very smart move, because even without Ukraine and NATO, look at all the support that Ukraine is getting from NATO without actual NATO certainly sending troops or even establishing no-fly zone, which for all the obvious reasons I think would be a very bad idea. But, you know, they're getting lots of very effective weapons. They've been apparently killing a lot of, I was going to say Soviet Russian tanks. Some of them apparently do, you know, they are handed down from the Soviet era. I mean, that means they've got 35-year-old tanks out there, tanks from the memories. But I think, oh, good, Ken got it. Ah, yes, thank you, Ken.
If it's a simplistic joke, Steve, Ken will get it.
If it's a what?
Minded enough.
If it's a what?
If it's a simple-minded enough joke, Ken will get it.
Okay, well, thanks. That's a nice compliment for both of us, Mike. I would never say anything like that about you, but that's because I'm so much a better person than you are.
No, actually, no. You're capable of making a much more complex joke.
Okay, good. Thank you. If you could tell that to my lady friend, she would very much appreciate that thought.
I never take sides in those type of arguments. Go.
But I think that Ali made a number of important points, and particularly, you know, in terms of negotiations. I think Ukraine is starting to lean in that direction. And he also talked about, you know, again, why I liked what he said, because he agrees with me, or I agree with him, that there are forces in Russia which are beginning to look at replacing Putin. And I don't think that those are just oligarchs, the Russian equivalent of the ruling class forces. I would imagine that there are an increasing number of military people in Russia who are looking at this, at sending these forces into Ukraine, apparently totally unprepared. The logistics have been terrible, that he ordered them to go. They've made the Russian army, and to a certain extent the Russian Air Force, because the Ukrainians are shooting down Russian fighter jets. They're shooting them down. There was one on television today. I don't know how many they've gotten, but they've gotten some. So I think there's going to be, you know, an increasing number of military people opposed. And I'll just say it again, what I said before. I think the most likely solution to this horrible catastrophe is the elimination of Vladimir Putin. But certainly, I don't think that somebody like Tariq Ali, who has a major international audience, would say that out loud in so many words as I just said. But I think that that's what he was hinting at, and I certainly would like to hear the opinions of my colleagues. Did they hear Ali say the same thing? Hinting at, yes, a solution, or I think the most likely solution to this is the elimination of Putin.
I'm not sure, because I don't think, I mean, this, again, everybody keeps talking about the von Stauffenberg as a something like that, but, you know, history doesn't often repeat itself. I mean, really, are there Russians out there who, within his circle, that are close? I mean, you know, there aren't that many dictators who've been assassinated, you know?
Okay. I want to throw something in here to all you guys talking about this. Of course, we want Putin to disappear. That'll be, you know, a possible thing. And the CIA is always doing coups and all of that. But I think I'm going to just guess and say in the last 40 years, we have not had an American president who's been innocent of killing less people than Putin has killed in the last month of civilians. You got Bushes, you got Obama, you got even Clinton. You know, this is a major problem in all politics. The head of a state, when he takes martial action, will get you know, what they call collateral damage. Civilians will be killed, including your own soldiers. And you know, look at the Civil War with Abraham Lincoln. You know, so forth. But invasions, even in Grenada, you know. So I don't know, but I don't know which president. I know that Obama and Bush. And I don't, maybe not Trump, but Trump too, you know, with the drones fighting ISIS and so forth. Lots of civilians killed, probably far in excess of anything that's happened in the Ukraine in the last month. So, you know, you want to put those guys in jail or execute them or put out a hit on them? Can we let them continue to govern? Can we let them retire with a full retinue of, you know, bodyguards and museums?
As a matter of fact, I don't know why there aren't Ukrainian pilots in Poland already ready to fly those planes over. But for some reason, Poland said, no, you've got to send those planes to a NATO base in Germany and then fly them from there. There's something weird going on there. But the fact is, you can still send them the aircraft. And more important than the aircraft, because again, the aircraft are a little outdated. And the Soviets are... They're Soviet-era aircraft. So, but the fact is that we are sending in the anti-tank weapons, the handheld anti-tank weapons, and the anti-aircraft weapons. And so, no, it's a no-win situation for Russia. But the two key things that Steve alluded to, or if not actually stated to when he was talking, one is that agreement by which Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in return for Russia promising never to invade or to take any aggressive actions towards Ukraine. That was broken. If it was signed by Yeltsin, unless Putin is going to declare himself, again, dictator for life, which he may in essence be, but the fact is, until he's going to say, I'm a dictator, everything else goes out the window, this is a total dictatorship, then he can't go back. He has to honor the agreement of the person who came before him, because he is representing his government, and his government made that agreement. And therefore, Russia has broken that agreement.
Hey, Steve, excuse me, Mike, come on, move on. We got what you're saying. Move on, please.
Done. Go.
Okay, great. Alex.
We lost Steve. Oh, Steve's coming
back. Steve's coming back.
He keeps getting his. Maybe we need to get Steve a new computer.
No, that's okay.
All right. So see how many
Alex?
were how. Actually, yeah, I did. I guess we have maybe time for one or two stories. Which I think a lot of this is captioned. I was not happy and was tense that day. I went under the knife to cut a part of my body. I didn't want to go, but I didn't have any other option. I did it for my children. There's obviously his scarf from his donation. Nuruddin is one of a growing number of Afghans willing to sacrifice a kidney for money. As the country descends into economic crisis following the takeover by the Taliban, the practice has become so widespread in the western city of Herat that a nearby settlement has been nicknamed One Kidney Village. Dozens of residents here have sold their organs afterwards, spread among destitute families of the money to be made. They include 19-year-old Shakila, who sold her kidney for $1,500 to pay off debts and buy food for her 2 children. When I gave my kidney, I had a lot of debt. We owed around 100,000, 220,000 Afghani, about $1,100. We paid more of the debt, and the remainder we bought rice, oil, and such things. No one really helped us. We ended up using all the money I got from the kidney. We had to give money to our creditors. There is little regulation of the buying and selling of organs in Afghanistan. Brokers usually match sellers with wealthy patients who pay the hospital fees and the donor. All the hospitals, at the hospitals where transplants are performed, few questions are asked. We do not have any information, anything from outside of the hospital. Where did a patient or donor come from, the surgeon, or how they have come from the outside? We have never investigated it because it is not our job. 20-year-old Aziza says she is still waiting for a broker to find a buyer for a kidney. If she can't find one, she says she will be forced to sell her daughter instead. Oh, God. We have nothing. My husband leaves in the morning and returns in the evening. He has a cart stalled. The most he can make is, what can I, wait, let me go back a little bit. You know, okay. Wait, let me, yeah. So he's making less than €1 a day. What can I do with it? You can see what the condition of my life is like. God and the Quran is my witness. We shiver in the cold from morning till night. My children have nothing. They are waiting to see their father. I have no other choice but to sell my child or my kidney. Taliban takeover and subsequent suspension of foreign aid has sent the economy into a free fall. More than 500,000 people have lost their jobs so far, the UN said last month. While some 23 million, around 55% of the population, are at risk of famine. All right, so that is, well, horrifying, to put it mildly. And yeah, I don't think there's too much to say beyond that, except if to do. What I have to say to Joe Biden for stealing those $7 billion is not, printable, or it's, has lots of 4-letter words. I think on this, United States is responsible. But let's have other people comment. Steve?
Well, actually, Alex,
go on, Mike, but let me mute myself.
I mean, the sanctions are certainly, causing a lot of problems. I'm just wondering where the Taliban is on this. They are running the country. They should be. I mean, I just wonder where they stand on all of this. The problem is, I don't know. In other words, if the Taliban is doing anything to negotiate about in getting rid of the sanctions, if we're talking about negotiations, but I wonder how they feel about this, because obviously this is it may be a black market, but it's almost an open black market. So do you have any information there about what the government, which is the Taliban, what the government feels about this or is saying about it, or if they're doing anything about it?
I think a lot of what I've seen is that without the money that, from their central bank, there's not a lot they can't. They have, Afghanistan, for a long time, I don't know, going back to like the 80s or maybe even the 70s, has had to import most of their food. So they need foreign currency to buy it from other countries, unless, countries are going to, in a humanitarian way, ship it in for free and, and then, distribute it as well. So, and I have, there's been, Biden talked about, we'll use half the $7 billion we took to for something like Iraq's, food for oil program, years ago, which of course we know led to hundreds of thousands of Iraqis dying, including many children. So that's not a great model either. I mean, there hasn't been much on negotiations between the U.S. and, or other countries to end the sanctions. Certainly, again, Biden again took that unilateral step of seizing their central bank assets, a lot of which are actually not money of the Afghan government. A lot of that money is personal deposits of Afghans. So they basically stole billions of dollars from private Afghans, not just from the government. So.
But one last question.
That's as far as I know, essentially. Yeah.
I just want to have one other question, then I'll turn it over to Steve. What happened to that plan that I had heard about, which was to try to get direct shipments of food? In other words, basically bypass the Taliban, the government, the Afghan government, which is now the Taliban, and basically ship in food and medical supplies and things like that. Humanitarian supplies, basically bypassing. Of course, they'd have to get permission from the Afghan government, but basically bypassing them and putting them in directly, so they wouldn't have to worry about lifting of sanctions. Money that should have been going to humanitarian things going to munitions or anything like that. But there was a plan, or there was an idea to send this stuff in directly. Is there anything about that? Has there been anything movement on that?
I haven't heard anything about it. I mean, I've been watching 24/7, but I haven't heard anything about it being implemented. And I think, well, definitely, again, this piece was late February. So
wait a minute. How do you do that? The Jehovah's Witnesses? Who's going to distribute the food?
Basically, in other words, you have relief agencies. The UN can actually do it, but they bypass. They get around the sanctions by not giving it to the government, but by bringing it in directly. In other words, you can actually do that. You can actually have planes land with supplies, and then they would bring in the supplies, and the supplies could be distributed, rather than lifting sanctions or giving money to the government. You don't know. In other words, they could say, we don't know if it'll go directly for the humanitarian aid. You're also not giving them, you're not bringing them up to an upper middle class living condition. You're just giving basic humanitarian supply. It's been done before, and even to countries in which there were sanctions, or even the countries that were at war. So I'm just wondering if there was any movement made towards this, or for all I know, the Taliban could have said, no, we won't allow it, or the United States might have said, no, that'll water down the sanction. I don't know, but I'm just asking if any movement.
I haven't heard anything about any progress being made for that. But yeah, and then I did hear, when they were saying, that they were going to try and do that, but nothing so far has come of it, as far as I'm aware. But Steve, what thoughts might you have?
Right. Am I unmuted? Yeah. Okay. I have little to add to this discussion. It's unfortunately something I have not been following. Obviously, people of Afghanistan are suffering greatly. But I always like to point out that the current suffering of the in the office of the President of the United States, when a national security advisor who came originally, interestingly enough, from Poland said to the President of the United States, you can give the Russians their Vietnam. And that's where there had been this small right-wing Afghani resistance movement to essentially a communist government in Afghanistan, which one of the leaders of which was somebody you may be familiar with the name Osama bin Laden. You know, that's where this goes back to. With that, I'm going to take my leave even a little later than I usually do. I usually leave at 10:45 because I have an important telephone call to make. So I'm leaving at 10:50.
Thank you. As always.
I will see everybody next week. It's always great fun to be with you gentlemen.
Thank you for your tolerance.
All right, Ken, and there's just one last little thing I want to play because it's WBAI and Pacifica related, which is this movie that's coming out. You might even know this guy about the radio personality Steve Post, who is a documentary about him called "Playing in the FM Band" is opening on Friday in Film Forum. I will definitely be going to see it. And again, I thought, well, since we're kind of like a radio show, you know, the history of radio and of these kind of people, especially since we do have that connection to Pacifica Network through, well, not just Jim, but all of us have been involved in various capacities at Pacifica. So I thought this was a good one to close out on. So it's about, this is the trailer for the upcoming movie about Steve Post, who, again, you guys will tell me if you know who he is, if you met him. He probably was big at BAI in the 70s and 80s.
No, I actually haven't heard of Steve Post.
No, I have not heard of Steve Post.
No conocemos Esteban Post. See, I told you, the biggest idiot on radio.
Freeform radio. You do whatever you want to do.
The nature of this kind of radio is simply that the more you think about what you're going to say beforehand, the less well it will come out when you finally say it on the radio.
Post was an original.
Dear Mr. Post, I am writing because I am in love with you. Oh, God. And there are a few things I feel I should know about you before I begin my pursuit of you.
For those of you who are curled up in the fetal position saying, I don't want to go to work, 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 I don't want to go to work.
This guy is a whack. He is born to be on the air.
April 21st, 1971. Dear Steve Post, I have a plan to end the war in Vietnam. My plan offers a welcome relief from the scrungy tactics of the peace movement.
I consider retiring every morning when the alarm clock goes off. However, if you keep laughing, I'll keep working.
All right. Well, I don't know when it's coming to, when it's coming to your neighborhood, Ken, but as I was saying, it starts playing on Friday at the Film Forum, which, well, all New Yorkers should know, is down on Houston, west of 6th Avenue, well, between 6th and 7th down there. Again, one of the few remaining independent movie theaters in the city. But yeah, so any of you guys know of, met Steve Post, since, again, he was part of Pacifica, again, back in the 70s. I think he went on to WNYC before he passed. But again, apparently a big, Jim probably, I'm guessing, knows a lot more about him. Yeah. He was around that time. But
well, I'm wondering if they'll ever have a tribute like that for Gary Knoll.
That'd be interesting. We could get Dennis to as a talking head, as a former listener.
I think Gary Knowles would be even more controversial, justifiably so. I don't want stories I've heard from people who knew Gary Knoll and everything like that.
No, he's still alive. He's still broadcasting.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
They knew him back when, but yeah, he's.
Jim can tell stories too.
I've met him. You know, don't get too close to him when he's talking. You get a lot of spit on you. He's
he's one of those guys. He's one of those guys.
Well, he's a businessman also. He's primarily a businessman. So people think he's a medical expert or something. He's a businessman. He's made a lot of money doing this. And but anyway, we're not talking about Gary Knoll. We're talking about Post.
Did you listen to him back in, when he was on the air?
I think that I don't know what word you want to talk about, like crazy or off the cuff radio. I think it's all got started. Freeform. Bob and Ray. Bob and Ray. Yeah. Remember Bob and Ray? There's a bunch of them. Fireside Theater.
By the way, I have to tell you something. They have a lot of the routines that we thought were free form or something. I read them. They were before they actually put them on the air sometimes. So they were excellent comedians. They were I would say brilliant comedians. But it wasn't. They could be free form at times, but for the most part, it wasn't. Free form radio now led to shock jocks and things like that, which is. I'm not happy with what it's led to. At the time, it had its place. Wasn't a great way to get information, but it was, if it was the right person, they could get you to think. They can jar you into thinking about something you might not have thought about.
Well, I think personally that Key and Peele have follow up in that tradition. Very dry, single point, push it thing to its extreme, and little vignettes of insanity. They're really good, carried on in that tradition. But there was Larry Josephson. Is that the right name? The guy who would do this, stream of consciousness radio.
Right. Well, I guess he's interviewed for this thing, but it's too bad. It's too bad Jim is doing LSB stuff, because I'm guessing he probably knew Steve Post.
Well, I think Bob Fass is gone, but but I knew him. I met him when I showed up at the studios there.
Yeah,
with boxes full of tapes I got from someplace, blank tape. So I donated it to the station. He was great guy. He led the movement to turn on, tune in, drop out. I always get the sequence wrong.
Right.
By the way,
Abby Hoffman used to come on Steve Post's show, among other, and John Lithgow was.
Oh, really?
Come on, yeah. So they have him in obviously. Abby's dead, but they have John Lithgow in it too. Yeah.
You would get good guests. By the way, I have to say one little thing here. When you said, I don't know if Jim's doing LSB, which is the local station for WBAI. I thought for a second that you said, I don't know if Jim's doing LSD. I realized that the WBAI...
I don't think he's done that for a while, Mike, but I know he has in the past.
That being on the WBAI local station board is like doing LSD. Yeah. So it's no accident that he sound alike.
But it's a bad trip. It's not a good trip.
It's a bad trip. Right?
What's the first rule about taking LSD? Don't wind up in the bathroom of a Howard Johnson looking in the mirror. That's it. Avoid that at all costs.
Yeah, that is what being in a WBA.
Okay, Ken. Well,
all right, wrap it up. Wrap it up.
Can play your song.
Oh no, we don't. That song. I'll play that song again.
Whatever. No, whatever song you want. I don't know.
Let's see if I can play that song again, and we're going out. Good night, everybody. I'm playing the song on the way out. Let's see where it is. Files, advanced videos, and here it comes.
Vladimir is sulking. He's looking pretty sad. His enemies are plotting from Minsk to Leningrad. Chechens making mischief. Journalists enraged. A story torn from Kafka. How we love to turn a page. Now Vladimir is scheming. He's turning all the wheels. Oligarchs and businessmen all cutting Kremlin deals. They're ripping off the country and buying mega yachts. Babushka swilling vodka while the whole damn country rots. He's bringing back the gulags like Stalin's glory days and disappearing dissidents in Lubyanka's mage, purging all the journalists and jailing girly bands. He's Kremlin's evil impresario. Vladimir is Putin on a show. Now Vladimir is swaggering like mafiosos do, sweeping through the Kremlin doors, a gangster through and through. No more perestroika, those wimpy days are lost, buried like his rivals in Siberian permafrost. Democracy so tiresome, such trouble to be free. Much better when whole games run by friendly KGB. And if you cross with Putin, he'll hunt you down with glee, purging you with pogroms and polonium in your tea. Now Vladimir is gloating. He knows he duped us all. He suckered us on Syria, and he's having such a ball. Whole damn world is watching now. Putin's got the stage. He's ravaging Crimea while his critics roar with rage. He's bringing back the gulags like Stalin's glory days and disappearing dissidents in Lubyanka's maze, purging all the journalists and jailing girly bands. He's Kremlin's evil impresario. Oh, Vladimir is Putin on a show.